She was too intimidating for her species. Then a human stepped up. The distress beacon had been screaming for 11 minutes before anyone answered it. Vakara did not pace. Her kind did not pace. The Solvari were a composed people, deliberate in every movement, every expression, every breath. But her hands, her 4 long-fingered, silver-scaled hands, were locked around the railing of her own ship's airlock with enough force to leave impressions in the metal. She was aware of this. She did not loosen her grip. The Galactic assembly station floated 300 kilometers off the port side, all glass and rotating rings, lit up like a city that had never learned what darkness was. She had been broadcasting on the emergency band since her navigational array went dark. 14 ships had come within range. 14 ships had seen her registry code, her species marker, her vessel silhouette. 14 ships had rerouted. She was not surprised. She was something far worse than surprised. She was used to it. The Solvari were not a war-mongering people. They had not started a single war in 400 years of interstellar history. They had contributed medical technology to 6 species, energy solutions to 3, and had negotiated the Dresh Accords that ended the Kaldari conflict before it consumed an entire star system. They were, by any reasonable measure, excellent neighbors. They were also 8 feet tall, possessed of 4 arms, covered in natural armor plating that shimmered between silver and black depending on the light, and their facial structure, brow ridges like cliff edges, eyes that glowed faintly amber in the dark, had caused more than one first contact situation to end with the other party fleeing the room. Vakara was, even among Solvari, considered striking, which was a polite word for the thing she actually was, which was the reason her crew had been the only ones to show up to her own promotion ceremony. She released the railing, looked at the impressions her fingers had left in the alloy, looked away. Her navigation console was fried. Her secondary comm array was offline. She had enough power for life support, her emergency beacon, and the running lights that told everyone exactly where she was. What she did not have was the ability to move. She was, to use the precise technical term her human colleagues at the assembly used, stuck. The assembly had human staff. She had worked with 3 of them over the past 2 years and found them. Confusing was the word she kept returning to. Not in a bad way. In the way that a river is confusing when you have only ever known still water. They moved fast and talked loud and laughed at things that were not funny, and found funny the things that were clearly disasters. And they looked at her specifically, in ways that other species did not. Not with fear, not with the polite, the carefully maintained social distance that the Dresh used, or the way the Kaldari always seemed to be calculating which direction the nearest exit was. They just looked at her, like she was a person. It was deeply unnerving. The comm crackled. Distressed vessel. This is the cargo hauler Bright River out of Kepler Station. We are reading your beacon. Do you need assistance? Over. The registry tag that came with the signal was human. She noted this without commentary. Bright River, and this is Commander Vakara of the Solvari diplomatic vessel Steadfast Regard. I have a navigational array failure and secondary comms damage. I am immobile and require a tow or repair team. Over. There was a pause. Not long. 2 seconds, maybe 3. Copy that, Commander. We are coming to you. Estimated arrival, 9 minutes. What is your crew complement? She blinked. No one had asked her crew complement. No one ever asked that question first when calling a Solvari vessel, and they asked it second or third, or sometimes they asked it while already leaving. 1, she said. I am the only crew aboard. This was a single-pilot diplomatic courier run. Another pause. Shorter this time. Understood. Sit tight. We will be there in 9. She did not sit. She stood at the airlock and watched the bright river come in. A battered mid-range hauler, the kind held together by good welds and stubborn optimism. The kind that made long, lonely runs through empty space and never made the news. It sidled up with the easy competence of a pilot who had docked 1,000 times in worse conditions and did not need anyone to applaud them for it. The docking clamps engaged. The airlock cycled. A human stepped through. He was not tall, not by any standard that would register in a room with Vakara. He had the kind of face that had been outside in the sun a lot, weathered at the edges, laugh lines deep enough to look permanent. He was wearing a work jacket with a patch on the shoulder that read Bright River in faded letters. He was carrying a diagnostic kit in one hand and had a thermos tucked under his arm. He looked up at her, all the way up. She was used to that moment. The recalibration, the flicker of something crossing a face, the instinct that every species seemed to share when confronted with something bigger than expected. He nodded. Commander Vakara. I am Cal. I work the Bright River out of Kepler. You want to show me your nav array, or do you want coffee first? She stared at him. He held up the thermos. It is not great coffee, but it is hot and it is here. Something shifted in her chest. She did not have a precise word for what it was. The Solvari had a word, Veth, for the feeling of something resuming after a long pause. Like a held breath finally released. Like a clock that had stopped starting again. She stepped back from the airlock and gestured toward the navigation bay. The array, she said. He walked past her without hesitating. She followed him, and for the first time in longer than she wanted to count, she did not feel like the most dangerous thing in the room. She felt like the person who needed help. It was somehow better. Cal crouched in front of the open navigation panel like someone who had done this 100 times and had the back problems to prove it, when he pulled the diagnostic kit open on the floor beside him, organized with the particular obsessive neatness of a person who worked alone and couldn't afford to lose a component in deep space. Each tool in its pocket, each connector in its slot. He did not comment on the size of the panel housing, which was built for Solvari hands and therefore roughly the dimensions of a small door. Vakara stood behind him. She was aware that standing behind someone was, in most cultures, either threatening or rude, and she had spent years learning to arrange herself in ways that made other species less uncomfortable. Sitting when possible. Keeping her arms, all 4 of them, close to her body. Tilting her head slightly downward when speaking so that her brow ridges didn't catch the light in a way that read as aggressive. She did not do any of those things now. There was no room to sit. Her arms were folded across her chest, which was simply where they went when she wasn't using them. She was standing at her full height because she was standing in her own ship. Cal had not reacted to any of it. Your primary routing board is fried, he said, not looking up. Not just damaged, fried. What happened? Ion wake from a passing freighter. They came through the shipping lane at 3 times the posted speed limit. And hit you with their discharge. Yes. Did you get their registry? No. They were gone before my sensors reset. Cal made a sound that was not quite a word. It landed somewhere between disgust and resignation. The sound of a person who had seen this before and was tired of seeing it. He pulled a component from the panel and held it up to the overhead light. It was visibly scorched along one edge. I have a replacement board that will fit this housing, he said. It is a generation behind yours, but it will get you moving. You will want to have it properly replaced at a station. Vakara had been doing the mental calculation since he opened the panel. A replacement board from a private hauler's parts stock was not a small thing. Parts like that had value. She was a diplomatic courier, which meant she carried credentials and security clearance, and currently nothing that could be used as payment. "What is your rate?" she asked. Cal sat back on his heels and looked up at her over his shoulder. His expression was the kind that had thought about something and already decided. "I will put you in my log as an emergency assist. The Assembly has a reimbursement protocol for independent contractors who provide emergency services to diplomatic vessels. It is slow and annoying to file, but they do pay." "I am aware of the protocol," she said. "It takes between 40 and 90 days to process." "Yep." He turned back to the panel. "I have done it before, and they eventually come through." She watched him work. His hands were quick and certain, the movements of someone who had stopped second-guessing himself in engine bays sometime in his 20s and never started again. He hummed occasionally, not a melody, just a low background sound, like a machine at idle. "You are from Kepler Station," she said. "Born and raised." "Well, raised. I wasn't born there, but I was about 3 when we arrived, and so it's the same thing effectively. You work the outer belt runs. Mostly. Some assembly contract work when it comes up. Pays better than hauling ore, worse than I'd like." He pulled another component, examined it, put it back. "You're with the Solvari Diplomatic Corps." "Yes. I have been posted to the assembly station for 2 years." He paused, just briefly, the kind of pause that meant something was being considered rather than said. How has that been?" She looked at the back of his head. He was asking a real question, not the polite opening of a conversation that wanted to be about something else. He had asked in the same voice he used to ask about her Navarre, direct, expecting an answer. "Functional," she said. He nodded. "Functional is a word that is doing a lot of work there." She said nothing. "I have a cousin who works station security at Assembly Hub 7, he said. She told me the rotation schedule for species quarters was set up without accounting for Solvari thermal requirements. You've been sleeping cold for 2 years. It is not unbearable. But it is also not nothing." She did not answer that either. He did not seem to require one. He kept working, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that settles when 2 people are both busy being honest without saying much. The replacement board took 40 minutes to install. Vakara handed him tools when he needed them, which he asked for by name and without any of the awkward overcorrection some species used around her. The excessive thank yous, the way they braced slightly when she moved toward them. He just said the name of the tool and she placed it in his hand and they worked. The navigational array came back online with a sound like a sigh. "Test your positioning," he said. She crossed to the console, and the display populated. Sector map, positioning grid, local traffic data. Intact. She ran the diagnostic protocol, green across the board. "It is reading correctly," she said. Cal stood up. His knees made a sound that she suspected was not supposed to happen, and he put one hand briefly on the wall as he straightened. "Good." He started packing his kit. "You should have full nav capability. Secondary comms will need a station repair. I don't have the components for that array model, but you can broadcast and receive on primary." "That is enough to get me in." "That is enough to get you in," he agreed. She watched him close the kit. She was building toward something. She had been building toward it for the last 40 minutes, and the shape of it was unfamiliar, which made it harder to find the words. "You are the 15th ship that came within range of my beacon," she said. He looked up from the kit. "It's the 14 before you changed course when they identified my vessel." He held her gaze for a moment. His expression did not perform sympathy. It did not offer the particular look she had learned to dread, the one that acknowledged something uncomfortable and then pivoted away from it as fast as possible. He just listened, and his face held the quiet of someone who was not going to pretend. "That happens," he said. "Yes." "It shouldn't." "No." He picked up his kit, and he tucked the thermos back under his arm. He had never actually offered her coffee again after the first moment, had apparently read that she wasn't going to take it, and had simply stopped making the offer without any performance of hurt feelings about it. "I will escort you to the station," he said, "in case the board gives you any trouble on the way in." She looked at him, at this weathered, unhurried man who had come because a beacon was screaming and had stayed to make sure she got home. "You do not need to do that," she said. "I know." He moved toward the airlock. "I am going there anyway." He was already through the airlock before she realized she didn't know his last name. She did not call after him. She walked back to her own bridge, settled into her command chair, built for her frame, fitted to her proportions, the one place in 300 kilometers that was sized for her, and began her approach to the station. The bright river fell in alongside her, either 300 meters off her port side, and held that position all the way in. She did not look at it the whole time. She was aware of it the whole time. The assembly station's docking coordinator was a Dresh named Solveth, who had been doing the job for 11 years and had the manner of someone who had processed enough paperwork to stop caring about anything that wasn't a form number. He cleared Vakara's docking approach in 14 seconds, which was fast, and assigned her a berth in the diplomatic section, which was expected. He did not ask why the human hauler was still running alongside her at 200 meters. He did not ask many questions in general. This was why he had kept his job for 11 years. Vakara docked, ran her post-arrival checklist, filed the Ion Wake incident report with the Assembly Traffic Authority, knowing it would be reviewed in approximately 4 months by someone who would mark it as reviewed and file it in a folder that no one opened. She filed it anyway. Record-keeping was record-keeping. She was halfway through her secondary report when the comm pinged. "Commander Vakara, this is Docking Bay 14. You have a visitor requesting access. No appointment. Name of Cal Merritt." She set down her stylus. She had not asked his last name, when the station had apparently gotten it from his docking registry. "Send him through," she said. He arrived 5 minutes later with 2 cups of station coffee, the real kind, from the crew lounge on level 3, not the thermos variety, and a look on his face that said he had been walking around the station long enough to find the good coffee, which meant he had been here before and had done the legwork. He held 1 cup out to her. She took it. She did not overthink why. "I filed the emergency assist report at the traffic desk," he said. "The clerk told me processing time is 60 days. Progress from 90. Small victories." He sat down in the chair across from her console, the chair that was technically a visitor's chair. Sized for species that were not Solvari, so it was slightly too small for human proportions as well. But he settled into it without complaint. "How is the board reading?" "Clean. No errors in transit." She looked at the coffee, and it was better than she expected. "You did good work. It is a straightforward replacement if you know the routing." He drank his own coffee. "The secondary comms array, if you want, I can pull the part from my next supply run." Kepler Station has a parts dealer who carries older array models. It would cost less than the station repair shop will charge you. She looked at him. Why? He considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. He did not wave it away or give her the easy answer about it being no trouble. Because I am in the outer belt every 3 weeks, he said. And because you clearly have not had anyone willing to spend 2 hours under your console in a long time. And because the part dealer at Kepler owes me a discount anyway. That is a practical answer. I am a practical person. She turned back to her console. On the secondary screen, the incident report sat half-finished. Beyond the viewport, where the station's outer ring rotated at its usual pace, steady and indifferent, the same as it always looked. I was promoted 6 months ago, she said, to commander. The ceremony was attended by my commanding officer, the 2 Solvari staff members stationed here, and a Caldari maintenance technician who came in to fix the temperature panel in the ceremony room and stayed because he didn't want to interrupt. She paused. He left before it finished. Cal said nothing, but he was listening the way some people listened, with his whole attention, not filling the space. My CO told me I should be proud, that the appointment was a recognition of merit, that my record was exceptional. She looked at the rotating ring. I am proud. I also ate dinner alone that night, as I have eaten dinner alone most nights for 2 years, because there are very few spaces on this station where I fit without rearranging the furniture and the conversation stop when I walk in. That is a long time to be the most alone person in a crowded room, Cal said. She turned from the viewport. He was watching her, and there was something in his face. Not pity, which she would not have tolerated, and not the careful blankness of a person managing their reaction. It was something more like recognition, unlike he had seen loneliness before from the inside and knew what it looked like from the outside. You are alone out here too, she said. It was not a question. Most of the time. He did not say it like it was a wound. It was just geography. The outer belt runs are not social work. You go, you haul, you come back. I have been doing it for 12 years, and I know the belt better than most people know their own neighborhood. Do you not find it isolating? I find it honest. He rolled the coffee cup between his palms. Out there you are what you are, and you deal with what comes, and there is no one to pretend for. I like that. He glanced at her. But I think for you it is different. You are not choosing to be alone. You are being made alone by everyone else's decision. She held very still, and the Solvari did not speak easily about things that hurt. Not because they were taught not to, but because precision mattered. And finding the right words for the right hurt took time, and most conversations did not wait long enough. This one was waiting. I was selected for diplomatic posting, she said, because my academic record was without equal in my cohort. I was warned before I accepted that it would be difficult, that my appearance would create challenges, that I would need patience. She looked at her hands, 4 of them, resting on the console surface, silver-scaled, too large for standard equipment, too large for standard chairs, too large for most rooms. I was not told that patience would mean eating alone for 2 years and sleeping cold and watching 14 ships change course. The room was very quiet. No, Cal said. They wouldn't tell you that. That would make it harder to fill the post. She picked up the coffee, and it had gone slightly cool while she was talking, and the slight bitterness of it had come forward. She drank it anyway. The part for the secondary array, she said. I will pay you the station rate, not your discount rate. He started to object. She stopped him with a look, not an aggressive look, just a flat one, the Solvari equivalent of a closed door. "I am not a charity case," she said. "I am a person who needs a part." He closed his mouth, nodded once. "Station rate," he agreed. "I will have it to you in 3 weeks." He left shortly after that. She stood at her viewport and watched the outer ring turn for a long time without thinking about anything in particular, which was unusual for her. She was a person who thought about things constantly and in great detail, and the absence of that machinery running was something she noticed the way you notice a sound stopping. The next morning, she arrived at the assembly diplomatic floor and found that someone had, not without announcement, replaced her standard-issue workstation chair with one from the cargo storage level, a model used for loading dock supervisors, rated for heavier frames, with adjustment range that actually accommodated her proportions. There was no note, there was no signature. There was just the chair, sitting where the old one had been, as if it had always been there. She stood in the doorway of her office for a moment. Then she walked in and sat down. For the first time in 2 years, she fit. 3 weeks became a rhythm. Cal came in on the 22nd day with a secondary comms array component wrapped in recycled packing foam and tucked into a hard-shell case that looked like it had been dropped a number of times and survived all of them. He installed it himself in an hour and a half while Vakara worked at her console, and they talked. Not about anything urgent, not about anything that needed to be said. Yes, just the kind of talking that happens when two people are comfortable in the same space. He told her about the outer belt, about a particular canyon formation in the asteroid field near waypoint Kessler 9 that caught solar light at a specific angle twice a year and turned everything the color of burning copper. About the freighter captain who had been running the same route for 30 years and still called the shipping lane by its old name, even though the name had changed twice, and about the dog that lived on Kepler Station. A real dog, the only one he knew of in the outer belt, who belonged to the parts dealer and had opinions about everyone. Vakara told him about the Dresch Accords negotiation, which had taken 3 years and had nearly failed 6 times. Last, and the moment in the final session when one of the Kaldari delegates had accidentally called the lead Dresch negotiator a word in the Dresch language that meant either wise elder or large flightless bird, depending on regional dialect, and how the entire room had held its breath for 10 seconds before the Dresch negotiator started laughing, and how that laugh had broken 4 hours of deadlock and led directly to the treaty signing. She told him about her first diplomatic posting, on a trade station at the edge of Solvari space, where she had been so nervous during her first formal reception that she had knocked over an entire refreshment table with her elbow, and the host had very graciously pretended not to notice, even though the crash had been audible from the next room. She noticed, somewhere around the 2nd hour, that she was speaking at a normal volume, instead of the careful lower register she used in common spaces on the station, where she had learned that her natural speaking volume startled people. Cal's comm chimed once. He checked it, replied in 2 words, put it away. "The array is reading clean," he said. She ran the check. Full secondary comms capability, response time nominal, no errors. "You are very good at this," she said. "I had to learn a lot of things I didn't expect to need." He closed the panel housing. When you're working alone out in the belt and something breaks, you can either figure it out or you drift until someone finds you. I chose to figure things out. How long have you been running alone? 12 years on the Bright River. Before that, 2 years crewing a geological survey ship out of assembly contract. Before that, he stopped, just briefly. Before that, I was somewhere else doing something different. She recognized the compression of it, the loaded pause around something not said. She did not ask. She had done the same thing the day before, when he had asked how long she had been in the diplomatic corps, and she had said 8 years, and let the 8 years contain everything they contained, without unpacking any of it. They understood each other, she was finding, largely through what they did not explain. The trouble started on the 38th day. She was in the Assembly diplomatic lobby, a large formal space, high ceilings, the delegation seating arranged in a half circle around the central floor. When the Keth delegation arrived. The Keth were a species she had not worked with before, newly contacted, newly admitted to Assembly observer status. Small beings, bipedal, with large eyes and a color signaling system in their skin that served as secondary communication. Their lead delegate was named Sovereign, and he had a reputation as a careful and thoughtful diplomat. The Vakara was there as the Solvari diplomatic representative, standing near the back of the room in the position she usually occupied at large gatherings. Far enough from the center to be unobtrusive, close enough to do her job. The Assembly floor coordinator, a Kaldari named Methos, had placed the Keth delegation in the greeting circle. Everything was proceeding normally until the moment Sovereign looked up from reviewing his tablet and saw Vakara across the room. She watched it happen, and the skin patterns on his face shifted. That was the color signal, which she had read about but not seen. And the pattern that moved across his cheeks and forehead was one she did not have the training to read specifically. But she knew the physical responses it triggered. His tablet slipped from his hands, caught by his aide. His delegation members took a collective half-step back. His security detail moved 2 steps forward. Across the room, she was a problem that had not been anticipated. Methos was already moving toward her. She knew what was coming before he reached her. She knew the cadence of this particular conversation, knew its rhythms and phrasings and careful diplomatic packaging. She was going to be asked to relocate to a side room for the duration of the greeting ceremony. She had done this before. She would do it again. "Commander," Methos began. "I know," she said. "The Keth delegation." I said I know. She turned toward the side corridor. The voice behind her was not Methos. "What's happening?" She turned. Cal was standing near the entrance to the diplomatic lobby. He was not dressed for the assembly floor. He was in his work jacket, the bright river patch visible, and he had clearly come directly from his docking berth because he was still carrying his toolkit. He had apparently been heading somewhere else and had come through this corridor instead. He was looking at Methos and at Vakara, and at the side corridor she had been moving toward. And he was reading the room with the quick, practical intelligence of a man who had been solving problems in bad situations for 12 years. "Nothing," Vakara said. "It doesn't look like nothing," he said. He looked at Methos. "Why is the Solvari diplomatic representative being redirected out of a diplomatic ceremony she should be part of?" Methos was a very experienced diplomat. He began to explain in the practiced, frictionless way of someone who had handled difficult conversations many times. Cal listened to all of it. He had the kind of stillness while listening that meant he was not going to be redirected himself, which Vakara recognized because she had the same quality, and it was one of the things that made other species uncomfortable around her. "I see," Cal said when Methos finished. "And has anyone spoken with the Keth delegate about this, directly?" Methos paused. "The greeting protocol is a protocol, not a law," Cal said. "I am asking if anyone told Sovereign what Solvari are, what their history is, what their diplomatic record includes, or if we are all just acting on the pattern recognition that says large and armored means dangerous and moving her out of the room before anyone thinks about it." The room had gone very quiet. Vakara had not moved. She was watching Cal stand in his work jacket in the middle of the assembly diplomatic lobby, toolkit in hand, and argue for her place in a room she had been quietly removed from so many times she had stopped counting. Methos looked at Cal with the expression of a very experienced diplomat, encountering an unexpected variable. He was accustomed to navigating competing interests between species with thousand-year cultural histories and carefully calibrated political sensitivities. He was not accustomed to being challenged by a cargo hauler in a work jacket. The Keth delegate, Methos said carefully, is in the early phase of contact with assembly member species. Their response to unfamiliar. Has anyone told him anything? Cal said again. Same tone, same stillness. He was not raising his voice. He did not need to. Methos stopped. No, he said after a moment. There has not been a formal introduction. Then make one, Cal said. I will wait. The room, which included Methos, 3 assembly staff members, Vikara, and the edge of the Keth delegation's field of view across the lobby, processed this. Methos, to his credit, was not a stupid man. He had been a diplomat for long enough to know when he had been caught doing the easy thing instead of the right thing, and he had enough professional dignity to face that cleanly. He straightened. He walked across the floor toward Sovereign. Vikara stayed where she was. Cal moved to stand beside her, not in front of her, not shielding her, just beside her, which was different. She was aware of the difference. Across the lobby, Methos spoke to Sovereign in quiet, precise tones. Sovereign listened with the full-body attention of a species that communicated through color and movement. His skin patterns shifted through several states while Methos spoke, and his large eyes moved to Vikara twice. Not with the reactive flinch of the first moment. With something more deliberate, the look of someone receiving information and updating their picture. And the second time his eyes moved to her, Vikara did something she almost never did in these formal settings. She met his gaze directly. She did not lower her head. She did not arrange herself to appear smaller. She stood at her full height, all 4 arms visible, and she met the Keth delegate's eyes across the diplomatic lobby of the Galactic Assembly with the full weight of 8 years of service and 800 years of Solvari diplomatic history behind her. And Sovereign's color patterns shifted again. She did not know their language yet, but whatever passed across his face in that moment looked, to her reading, like it might be respect. Methos returned. The Keth delegation has requested a formal introduction to the Solvari diplomatic representative, he said. Commander Vikara, if you are willing. She walked across the lobby. She did not look at Cal, but she heard him, very quietly, exhale. Sovereign was small. She was aware of this in the way she was always aware of the size difference between herself and almost everyone she met. He looked up at her with his large, clear eyes, and up close she could see the color patterns moving across his face in rapid, small waves. This close, the movement was constant and subtle, the way breathing is constant and subtle, the ambient communication of a species that could not turn it off. Commander Vikara, he said. His standard was careful and slightly formal, much the cadence of someone who had learned it from texts. I am told your people negotiated the Dresh Accords. Yes, she said. I have studied the Accords. They are considered a model of modern diplomatic architecture. He paused. The color across his cheeks did something she could not read. I reacted poorly earlier. I want to acknowledge this. Vikara looked at him for a moment. You had no information, she said. You reacted to what you saw. That is not a failing. It is a place to start from. Sovereign was quiet for a moment. His color patterns moved in something slow and even. "I think," he said, "that I would like to learn more about Solvari history, if you are willing to speak with me before the session." "Yes," she said. "I am willing." They walked together toward the consultation alcoves along the south wall, and Vakara was aware of the room behind her, aware of Methos watching with the expression of a man recalculating, aware of the Keth delegation's visible relief at their lead delegate's ease, aware of Cal, still standing near the entrance in his work jacket, watching her walk across a room that had been trying to push her out of it. The consultation with Sovereign lasted 40 minutes. He was a careful, thorough thinker, and he asked questions that revealed a genuine framework of values she found she could speak to directly. By the end, the formal session had not yet started, and they had already established more genuine understanding than most first contacts managed in the opening round of structured talks. She found Cal afterward in the corridor outside the lobby. He was sitting on a wall bench with his toolkit on his knees, doing something with a calibration tool that was probably not urgent enough to actually require doing right now. She sat down beside him. The bench was not sized for her, so she sat on it the way she always sat on things not sized for her, by accommodating the reality of the situation without making it into something to discuss. "You did not have to do that," she said. "I know. It was not your argument to make." "No," he agreed. "But you were about to leave the room, and you shouldn't have had to leave the room, and someone who understood that needed to say so." He looked at her. "I am not saying you couldn't have said it yourself. I am saying you shouldn't have had to." She thought about this, about the distinction between cannot and should not have to, about the 8 years of walking out of rooms and arranging herself to be smaller and eating alone and building a diplomatic career of genuine merit inside a structure that had never been built to hold her. "You are a cargo hauler from Kepler Station," she said. "That is true. You have no formal standing with the Assembly Diplomatic Corps. You are not a delegate, a staff member, or a registered observer. Also true. You walked into a multi-species diplomatic ceremony in your work jacket and challenged a floor coordinator's decision on behalf of a person you have known for 38 days. He thought about this. That is an accurate summary. Why? He set the calibration tool down, looked at the far wall for a moment, and she recognized in his profile the face of someone finding the right words for something they had not planned to say aloud. "Because I have been out in the belt for 12 years, he said, watching the assembly make decisions about the outer systems from stations that have never been to the outer systems, watching procedures built for convenience get applied to situations they don't fit, and watching people do the math. Is it worth the argument? Then is it worth the trouble? Is it easier to just comply? And deciding to comply because the system wears you down." He looked at her. "You have been complying for a long time. You are very good at it. It is the wrong thing to be good at." She was quiet for a long moment. "My people have a word," she said. "Veth. It means the feeling of something resuming after it has been stopped too long, like a clock that starts again." He nodded slowly. "The chair in my office," she said. He did not confirm or deny. His expression did the thing it sometimes did where it didn't move but was clearly thinking. "Thank you," she said. "For the chair, for the array component, for the coffee you offered that first day, even though it wasn't very good." She paused. "For this morning." "The coffee was not very good," he agreed. She looked down the corridor, the assembly station's permanent hum, the recycled air, and the overhead lights that she had never quite gotten used to, because they were calibrated for species that tolerated less light than she did. "I need to submit a formal request for the thermal settings in the Solvari quarters," she said. "I have been putting it off because every time I've raised environmental accommodation issues in the past, the process has been—" She found the word. "Exhausting." "File it," Cal said. "I will file a supporting report as an independent assembly contractor. Contractor reports go through a different desk than diplomatic requests. Sometimes they move faster." She looked at him. "You are very good at understanding systems," she said. "I am very good at finding the routes that work." He picked up his toolkit and stood. "When something is blocked, you find the way around. That is just navigation." He was already 3 steps down the corridor when she spoke. "Cal." He stopped. "I eat dinner at 1800 in the crew lounge on level 3, she said. "It has the ceiling height, and the chairs there accommodate my proportions." He turned around. His face was doing the quiet thing. "I know the one," he said. "They have decent coffee too." "They do," she said. He nodded once and walked on. She stood in the corridor for a moment longer, in the station's ordinary hum and recycled air and too dim light, and felt the specific feeling she now had a word for, and the resuming of something, the clock starting again. Then she turned toward her office and the work that was waiting, and walked there at her full height.